Hello and welcome to Midwest Writers Room. Our mission is to encourage, educate, and celebrate writers of the Midwest. I'm Luella Schmidt.
Humphrey. Today we're interviewing Joseph Rein. Joe is the author of Youtopia, technothriller series. The third installment, Youtopia Infinity, is scheduled for release this December. He is also author of Roads Without Houses, a collection of short stories set in Wisconsin and Minnesota. He is currently a professor of creative writing at the University of Wisconsin River Falls, a health nut, and the father of four exhausting but rewarding children.
We're excited to talk to Joe today. Welcome to Midwest Writers Room. How you doing?
Good, good. Thanks. Yeah, speaking of my children, we're Packer family, we're Packers fans, and so but my boys are too young to stay up late to watch those night games. So we wake up early to watch them and finish them. So on Monday mornings when they have the Sunday night game, I'm always a little more tired because I had to wake my boys up early just to finish the game. But doing good otherwise.
Nice commitment. And just, in interest of fair disclaimer, you're talking to two Vikings fans. And we are recording this the night after the Packers went down to Dallas and ended in a overtime tie. So any
Long,
further
stressful
references will be
start.
towards that.
Yeah.
All right, Joe. So let's dig in and let's start with you and go way back to the beginning for your origin story. So tell us, how did you really land into the writing arena?
Um, yeah, so mine was pretty early. I think in meeting a lot of writers, I know that some come into it, at any time in their life, but mine was pretty much when I was young. I knew this was kind of what I wanted to do. But also I think you need encouragement along the way. And I always look to like, okay, who said like, hey, you can actually do this thing, not like, hey, this is just a fun hobby for you, or this is something that, you're better at this, try that out. And so I always go back to this story I wrote in fifth grade for Mrs. Bolter. It was a story about like I think a gazelle. No, it was a gazelle. It was some sort of animal like escaping an attack, and her praise of it, right? The action in it, the sort of the suspense, all that sort of stuff. It was like, oh, this is really cool. I was just kind of playing around, but she saw something in me. And then carrying that through in ninth grade, I had written a story about a sort of divorced child who was caught in between her parents and sort of like contemplating life. And my teacher then, Mrs. Goffard, she saw that story. She said, "This is great. You should submit it to Fox Cities Magazine for this student award." And I was like, "Okay, I'll do that. Great." And I ended up winning. And so it's like those sort of moments where I always go back to like people who said, you've got something here. That sort of propelled me into it. And so from then in college and beyond, I just sort of knew I wanted to be a writer. I wanted writing to be part of my life. I teach writing now because I get to talk to students about it all day. And I just wanted to be surrounded by writers. I wanted to do it. I wanted to put myself in those situations where writing was like an integral part of my life. And that was from when I was very, very young.
I love hearing stories like that because, quite often it is teachers, but not always, that will just drop this line of encouragement that's probably a throwaway for them that they may not remember it
Yeah.
ever again saying that, but don't realize the amount of impact that they've had, especially on young minds. I mean, I've said it on here before, my moment came, I think, like my second year of college when I had to do some sort of creative writing assignment. And I was big into mythology at the time. So I did this whole story about Apollo and Heracles, which is the proper pronunciation of his name, having to go rescue Poseidon from being captured. It was just kind of throw. I just wanted to get the assignment done, right,
Yeah.
and hit the grade. And the teacher wrote this long comment on the article. It's like, "Wow, this is really good. You have such a creative mind. You should consider doing this going forward." And at that point, unlike you, I didn't really know writing was going to be part of my life going forward until that moment.
And
And
then it
that's
came.
when it hit me. It's like, wow, okay, maybe I'll think about that. So,
That's I was
yep.
just going to say that's why I take an encouraging approach when I teach too. Of course, we need constructive criticism, otherwise we're not going to grow. But I always try to look for, and almost all students have something, right, that we could give them that sort of encouragement for. And those ones I've had student writers who are far better than I was at their age, these are 19, 18, 19, 20 year olds, and they're writing stuff that blows me away. And I tell them that I say, right, you're farther along than I am, right? Like, and you have what it takes to stick to this. And so I think paying it forward is something that I really try to do as well.
And that's great. And I fully expect that at some point in the future, there's going to be some author sitting on a podcast like this saying, yeah, I had a teacher, Joe Rein, back in college that I never even thought about it until he made this comment. So
Be
you were
great.
on the other end. Hey, so you knew it when you were young. Now talk us through how did it manifest as you grew into your adulthood?
Yeah, so I went into my undergrad going into English. Again, sort of like recognizing that I didn't want to have to put all my eggs in the writing basket and sort of be like, this is going to be my livelihood. And so I pursued that knowing I kind of wanted to get a master's, a PhD. I kind of knew that pretty early. I want to teach this thing and I want to teach it at the college level. So simultaneously, that also kind of allows me to put pressure on myself a little bit, right? Like because in order to stay in academia, you need to publish, and I know that deadlines and having that sort of external push a little bit can get you over those humps when you just kind of don't feel like doing it. Like when creatively the things aren't flowing, but they're not always going to flow, and I think so that flame can kind of like peter out, and for some people just die altogether because life gets in the way, right? So I started on that path. I published my first short story when I was in my master's program in Nebraska when I was 22, and then it was sort of trying to accumulate short pieces. I knew the novel was coming and I would write longer stuff, but you only have so many novels in you. And I think if you're always chasing a novel too much, you're missing out on a lot of opportunities to just try some new stuff. So, so I started doing short stuff, and eventually you have enough short stories where you're like, hey, I should put these together and try to publish it. So that's kind of how Roads Without Houses came. At first, it was a collection that I sort of had like half and half, like stories Wisconsin, Minnesota, and half that were kind of experimental and didn't really fit. But I sent them to contests. The Holy Cow, which is a local Midwest. I sent it to some other short story publishers contests, and I was a finalist in a few of them. Never won it, but the publisher that eventually did publish it, I contacted them first. Actually, I said. I know I didn't win. I was a finalist. Do you ever publish, ones that are finalists? And he said, Kevin Morgan Watson is his name. He said, yeah, I was actually about to reach out to you. I was like, oh, great. But he said, this isn't a collection. He said, these are great stories, but it's too disjointed. And that was the first time that I sort of thought, step back and thought like, yeah, he's right. The writers who have New Yorker credits and et cetera, they can kind of just throw together whatever they want because it's all been published in really high places. Mine had been published in good journals, but not to that degree. And so I set to sort of making a more cohesive collection. I kind of went to like the Winesburg, Ohio, going to have local people, different people who are connected through either happenstance or through where they live or et cetera. But each person's going to have each character, each story is going to be separate. So like they make these subtle connections throughout, but all of them, it remains just a collection, not like a novel in stories where you're following a plot or anything like that. So that was fun. That was my first experience, like working with an editor, right, and sort of going through the whole large full book publication process. And after that, it was like, okay, it's time for the novel.
So
So,
before you jump into Utopia, Roads Without Houses, so it came out in 2018.
yep.
When you put that together, did you kind of center it around a theme? And if so, how did you really come up with that if you had all these kind of disjointed stories?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I didn't intend the themes, and I think the themes that are there, I think I always say writers, if you want to know what a writer is afraid of, just read their work. And I think probably a lot of the themes in this work were just me sort of teasing out my fears. So the first story is about a couple who loses a child when they're young, and the parents like not being able to sort of stay together or piece that out and how they become ultimately disconnected through there. And so I think this themes that sort of ran through. One thing I wanted to do was I wanted to make sure that these characters, the main characters were side characters in other people's stories. It feels very true to life in that way, right? Like everybody thinks they're the main character of their own lives and own stories. So I wanted to make sure that no matter what like important thing was going on in somebody's life, it wasn't as though that exact same thing was going to happen to another character. But I think themes of loss, themes of sort of like humans, and this is a theme that comes through in the novel, I think, even more so, but of humans having that self-destructive bent to them. So there's a character, the final character in this collection, wants to swim across the lake, and this is the lake that I grew up in my childhood, and it's a big lake, Lake Nakabe. It's up in Crivets. It's a big lake, but you could certainly swim across it if you wanted to. But she's young and she tries it, and after getting a bunch of her parents sort of saying no, you can never do this, and but she just has this like instinct to want to do this thing that's potentially she sees as an achievement, but also comes with self-destructive and potentially dire consequences. And I think that theme sort of popped up in a lot of my work, not that I was writing to it, but that once I saw it, I was like, okay, this is something that I wrote that story specifically just for the collection because I saw that theme. And then I said, well, this would be a good capper for it. She doesn't, spoiler, she doesn't die, but her parents sort of, after this, she gets saved and her parents sort of like, keep her from the water then, and she still has this yearning for it. And so I think that that theme is something that, you know, came organically, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about Utopia? Tell us about the trilogy and about this book.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I started Utopia kind of right around that 2018, like right after the short story collection ended, ultimately published in 2024, which shows you how long the publication game can be. Um, so it's labeled a techno thriller. It has like sci-fi elements, although I didn't intend it as such. It's more, I think, as the title would suggest, it's sort of it's an attempt at the perfect world set in the current time, but sort of um, with a sci-fi bent to it, meaning like the world has come up from 2014 to 2024 with this company called Utopia, where you can just sort of live out your perfect life in your own mind. I guess my inspiration with this is I studied utopias when I was in college. I was really interested in the idea that we can't really have a perfect world when we have to share it with other people. What you want, what I want, what my wife wants, what my kids wants is it's never always going to coincide with that idea of free will and the idea of what we really desire. And so characters can sort of live in this virtual reality like space in their own mind, and they're just sort of um, it's this company that's growing and growing, and they start to see healthcare benefits because a person who's terminally ill could live longer if their bodies are not living in the world. And so it has all these sort of like social implications to it, but the thriller part of it is somebody starts murdering these people in their own minds, and so the main character is an FBI agent who comes in and who has to sort of figure out who wants this company gone, how is it happening, why is it happening, and it follows that through line. It was never quite intended, at least I didn't at first intend it to be a trilogy, even though I left the ending kind of open-ended. But my publisher also sort of came to me and was like, sci-fi, fantasy, all these genres work better as series. People want to read series. They want to know there's another one. When they see there's three of them, they'll go to that first one. So do you want to write two more? And as a writer, you don't say no to that. You sort of say, yeah, absolutely. And so I had to sort of generate the ideas for number two and three out of just sort of what number one was without having to. And that was the thing. I'm not a big sequel person, but I was sort of like, I have to come up with a new concept. So number two is just that, but for a specific age group. Number three is all of a sudden you can share it. So there's this newest one, Utopia Infinity, is you can bring your family in and you can all live together. However, it still brings up that quandary of like what happens when you and I want something different. Oh, well, we just split off and we go do our own thing, but we don't really realize it's happening, right? And then we come back together. And so it takes on sort of more complexity as it goes, I think. But that was the challenge of doing a trilogy is like you don't want to be like with those movie sequels, those bad comedy movie sequels that just sort of do the same exact thing but move locations or something, right? You kind of want to take it somewhere where you're interested in it and it's doing something new. And um, so that's where I'm at now. And I'm actually excited. I ended up, I think, enjoying writing the third book more. I had a deadline again, get it done within a year, which sort of forces you out to that computer screen. But I also got to play with it a little bit more. You know, at this point, you sort of just have fun with it too.
So I have to ask, have you ever played any of those like Second Life or meta type games where essentially you're doing what you've described there, creating
Yeah.
your own virtual world and populating it? I've never played those. My kids used to, but is that something you were into?
Yeah, so I mean, I consider myself, I guess, old school, right? When you're thinking of like when I was actually video gaming and things like that, but like Sim City and then The Sims and like that sort of stuff was the stuff that I was doing. By the time the things that happen now, you know, I guess Utopia is probably influenced um, by literature and by dystopic literature, but it's also influenced by movies. Like it has a very, like everyone hears that and they say, oh, The Matrix, right? Or, oh, that episode of Black Mirror that gets referenced a lot. Or there's Vanilla Sky, like those sorts of things, like lucid dreaming, those sorts of things. And I'm like, yeah, I realized that I wasn't that this was an idea that many people had. I think I'm taking a unique angle at it in a certain way. Um, but if I talk too much about that unique angle, it kind of spoils the plot a little bit. So I try not to go too much into it. But I do think, yeah, it was definitely influenced by sort of video games, by film, and by literature.
I was going to ask you if you had an example you could share with our listeners of the techno part of the techno thrillers, some little interesting piece that you added in specifically.
For my,
Into
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So I when I read it aloud, when I do events, I read something from it's roughly the fourth chapter, but it's when she's witnessing the murder of what's happening. But how do you witness a murder of something that happened in somebody's mind? So I was very drawing this very cinematic in my mind. It's going to be a screenplay someday, I think, to my mind. But so they're viewing this and you're in a room that has completely concave screens so that you can sort of step into it, right? And wall to ceiling screens that surround you. But what you're doing is you're sort of watching the what I call the feeds of this person's mind's eye, right? So you're supposed to be sort of experiencing what this person had experienced. That's how she goes to the quote unquote crime scene. And so she steps into this, but now envision that you are seeing it through somebody else's eyes and the breathing, right? You're hearing the breathing, a person's coming and attacking you, how like personal that would feel in that moment as though you're like sort of sharing that experience with someone. So I like to read that portion of it because it starts the mystery of the novel, of course, like who's doing this thing? Oh, it's an avatar. You don't know who it is, but it's this person attacking. But it also, I think it tries to get onto that sort of like cinematic, but also really intense feeling of what it would be like to experience somebody else's life in that way, like quite literally, not stepping into their shoes, stepping into their eyes, in a, to a degree.
That's cool. I can imagine that would be neat. And you mentioned the screenplay. Have you written any other? Is that something of interest to you in the future, or have you already tried it?
Yeah, I have. So, I have a friend. His name's Nino Aldi. In high school, whenever we would get an assignment, we'd be like, "Can we make a movie instead?" Um, and so we ended up, and he wanted to be a filmmaker, and so we ended up doing so many short films when we were in high school. We actually filmed like a 50-minute film and like showed it at our theater. And it was, we lived the movie star life when we could in high school. But he went out to Hollywood and he's been out there for a while and he's been really plugging away at it. So we've done some short films. I wrote a short film and produced it and acted in it myself because that was fun. But we've also,
Totally.
yeah, I mean, just why not? We also did a feature film, and sort of spoiling my good news. I'll hold back on that for the good news section.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
speculative, so I'll hold back on that.
That's great. What about audiobooks? Have you have done any narration of your books?
Yes, I have. That was that was a learning curve in a really good way. When my publisher said to me, like, we can do audiobooks and here's how it works. And it was sort of, okay, audiobook narrators get royalty statements, get this, that, and the other thing of that. And I said, well, I'm kind of interested in it. Like I don't consider myself an actor. I don't consider myself a voice actor in any sort of way, but also I do like it when authors narrate their own audiobooks. I think audiences like that to some degree too. They sort of hear inflections and sort of, oh, this was the author's take on it. So I said, I think I want to do this. And he said, okay, yeah, go ahead. Which you don't get from every publisher. So it was nice to sort of have that freedom. So I started narrating the first book, realized that editing an audiobook takes an awful lot of time. Just to sort of get the cadence down. I was telling Ken before that I didn't realize how slowly I talked until I recorded an audiobook voice, and I was like, oh man, I got to speed this up, or otherwise I'm going to be here forever cutting out things. Um, but yeah, it's a really rewarding process. I know, especially because nowadays so many books are being narrated by AI, and I think there's something that we need to preserve when it comes to actors or authors themselves reading their own audiobooks. I think there's just a personal touch that we need to keep with it, and so that's why I keep plugging away on it. So I'm working on the third right now. And yeah, when it comes to amount of time taken, I think it takes as much to read in and edit that audiobook as it does to sit down and write the first draft of a novel, for sure.
Wow. That is a lot.
And you
Mhm.
do have, I mean, I will say you have a pretty good voice for
Yeah.
narration too. I mean,
Oh,
like,
thank you.
the timbre, your cadence, I think is pretty good. Not everybody has that naturally, nor can they actually emulate that when needed. So,
Thank you.
you're
Appreciate
one
it.
step ahead there.
You know what's tough though is voices because some listeners really like them, want them. I don't, maybe I don't have the confidence in myself for some of the voices, but I also think it can be gimmicky and disingenuous a lot of times. So I tend to, I mean, I will give inflections and I will give some voices, but I won't go over the top with it. And I think that's one of those middle grounds where some people are going to be like, he didn't do the female voices or he didn't do the kid voices this way and that and the other thing. And other people are going to appreciate it. And you just sort of have to make a choice about it.
I feel like the only audiobooks I've ever heard, like I know some people do like an official production of an audiobook with actual actors,
That
and then
does,
there's
yeah.
music in the background and everything. Like that's one thing to have different voices, but if the authors read their own book, I guess I'm more comfortable with just more reflection rather than going full on characters.
Yeah, I mean,
Ken,
I
would you like
can.
to read the WWE message next? I don't know. It's just like totally weird.
This, yeah, this is going way back now, but in my high school's production of Cinderella, I played the wicked stepmother. My yeah, my it- the director came to me one day and said, "Do you want to be in this play? You want to try out?" And I tried singing, and I don't have a good singing voice, but she's like, "Why don't you try this one thing?" So that whole play, I kind of had that. It was like a rip off of Mrs. Doubtfire almost, right? Like, ah, la, 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 la. But then every now and then drop into this low voice, and then maybe that sticks in my mind. Like, yeah, it was for comedy, right? Like, it wasn't a serious thing. I don't want to try it in my audiobooks because it would seem like a joke to me.
Yes, the approach is critical. All right, Luella, should we dive into the WWA message?
You bet.
Join WWA on November 5th for a workshop titled A 6-Month Guide to Launching Your Book, presented by Maggie Smith. Marketing a book is one of the most misunderstood and frequently frustrating parts of the publishing journey. This practical, insightful workshop explores what happens after you've written the book, diving into the strategies and systems that will help you find your readers. Designed for authors at all stages, the session breaks down the essential components of a successful marketing plan with clarity and realism. Find out more at wiwrite.org/events.
All right. Back to Joe. So, in this segment, we're going to talk a little bit more about you, and we're going to start with some advice that you might have for writers. I'm wondering if you have any go-to at the top of mind that has really genuinely helped you.
I do, yeah. And I think one of the biggest ones is like writer's block, like that idea of writer's block. That's one that students ask most about, this idea like, oh, how do you overcome something when you have writer's block? So my biggest advice to them is number one, especially if you're writing something longer, stop when you know where you're going next. I think as an early writer, I would exhaust myself. I would like get everything out there and then I'd walk away. And then when you come back, you just oh, okay, where do I go from here? So I'm always comfortable with, and I say like, if you're writing and it's going really well, and then it's like, okay, and next I'm going to write this thing, that can sometimes be the best time to stop because next time you sit down, you're already in it. You don't have to sit there and face that cursor that's sort of blinking at you, and in in that way too, I think one of the big things that I try to do is. Uh, I try to like do a lot of mindless tasks that will allow my mind to sort of roam because I think the solution to any problem in writing, and a lot of writing is just solving like I need this character to do this thing or get this or achieve this, but I don't know how to do it. And sitting there trying to tease it out for me doesn't work. So instead, I'll go for a bike ride. I like just going country road biking is where a lot of my good writing gets done because I allow myself to sort of sit back and think about all of these different things, and then the solution will come to me. And then again, I when I get home, I sit down because I'm like, okay, I gotta get this out. Now I know this thing. Washing the dishes. There's just like a number of things that I know if it's not working for me, like just go do this thing that I don't have to think about. Because then you can allow your mind that sort of like no stakes space. Um, and then the last one that comes out is I just say, so you have to celebrate anything, big or small. Success in writing comes in so many different shapes and forms. If you want to win the Pulitzer or the Nobel, right? Like, which when in my youth had aspirations to, right? Like, that's fine to aim for the biggest thing possible, but that doesn't mean that the successes along the way aren't big successes. And I say not just publication, right? I think one of the biggest successes is when somebody reads your work and they come up to you and say, "Hey, this really impacted me. This really moved me." I'm like, that's kind of what we're doing this for, anyways. That's why I started doing it because I read something and I was like, wow, I want to be able to do that for somebody else. And so I tell students all the time, I tell writers, like, anytime you get a success like that, right? That's good occasion to get whatever beverage you enjoy or whatever food that's a celebratory thing and just sort of celebrate that um, because writing can be full of failure. It can be a lot of things that sort of bring you down. Um, or not failure, but just sort of difficulty, I suppose. Like moments where it feels like, is this worth what I'm putting into it? And so when you do get those minor successes, I'd say then it's the time to celebrate.
Yeah,
So,
those are all really great advice. Can I say, well, I joke all the time in my own head about the little favors I do for future Lou. So
Yeah.
one of the things about stopping and leaving myself a note for the next day, like I'll be like, okay, tomorrow we're gonna do X, Y, Z in the scene I'm working on or whatever. That's like me, like present me leaving a little gift for future Lou, which is all about starting or giving you a place to start the next time.
Right. And I'm kind of harsh on myself too. So if anyone read my drafts, they would read these bold headings of me being like, "Hey, figure this out," right? Or like I skip. I will like if I know that I need something here, like it needs good setting detail, but I just don't have that today. Like just leave yourself a note, come back to it, right? It didn't happen today, but it'll happen later. Yeah.
Yep.
I
Yeah.
really love the part about the mindless task because that resonates with me. Because you're right. You need to let your mind unanchor itself, let it drift while you're doing something that doesn't require a lot of thought. There's also a double-edged sword. I was driving the other day, like a 3 hour drive, 3.5 hour drive, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna noodle over some problems in my current book I'm working on. I want to think about that on the entire 3 hour drive because I have nothing else to do.
Yep.
I spent 3 hours ranking male rock singers' voices in my head and why I liked their voices. I'm like, and I kept coming
Who's
back to that. I could not focus on my book. I don't know why I landed on that. So it was a waste
Ken?
of 3 hours, a mindless
Who is
task, and I
number one,
wasted it.
Ken? Who is number one? I want to know.
I had to go with Sebastian Bach from Skid Row for a
Yeah.
rock singer. I mean, he always jumps to the top of my list, but I had Eminem on there for some reason because I just like the way his voice sounds, even though he's not a traditional singer. Just what he can do with his voice impresses me. So,
Very
but yeah,
lyric too. Yeah.
my wasted.
Freddie Mercury comes to mind for me too. That's the
Yes.
first name that
Yep.
jumped in my head when you said that.
Interesting. I really want to go follow Ken down that rabbit hole, but instead I'm going to ask you, Joe. So what do you have as a muse or for inspiration? A lot of our guests talk about nature. Music is important to folks. Do you have something that sticks out for you?
Um, yeah, so I guess this is a bit of a strange one because it simultaneously took away my time from writing, but also became like the reason to write is when I started having kids. Like I initially like I always wanted to write and I always did it and I always had all this time to do it. But then once my first daughter was born, and I have four now, age ranges from 14 to 7. When my first daughter was born, it was like I was up late and early, reading to her, like sort of exhausted all the time, figuring out how to be a new parent. But then also like this drive of like, oh, okay, I want to leave something for them to be able to sort of say, look at my dad did this. I want them to see that it's possible in their own lives to create, not just to sort of yeah, my daughter's a really great visual artist and she does like graphic novel work that amazes me. And I want to be encouraging in every sort of way, but I also want I'm always a lead by example person too. Like I would rather not say to somebody, hey, you can go do this if I'm not putting that into practice myself. And so I think part of my muse sort of in doing this now is like, and why I keep at it and why I wake up early to write and all those sorts of things is because I want them to know, like, if they have a passion, and it doesn't have to be a creative passion necessarily, right? But if they have a passion, they can pursue it and they'll find success. And they just got to keep at it and keep away. And so I think showing them that when I feel like, oh, maybe this writing thing, and I've had this thought once or twice, and it's a scary thought, like maybe this writing thing I could just stop, and maybe life would be easier. Um, but then immediately I sort of think to myself, right, the only way you fail with it is if you stop, right? If you keep on, you'll find levels of success. And then all my kids will be able to see that, and that's something they'll be able to take away.
Nice. Walking the walk. That's impressive. Let's shift gears a bit then and then talk about kind of what you write with. Like,
Yeah.
do you like to write in a certain environment? What types of tools do you actually use when you're writing?
Yeah, I'm a music person. I know you are too, Ken. I have to have music in no matter where I am. And so the spot isn't that important to me. I've written in coffee shops, I've written in my basement, I've written in my office. So the location to me isn't as important as being able to zero in with just putting in that music. And I listen to trance music. Um, I listen a lot to Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon because it's not lyric, but also because I'm so familiar with it that the lyrics don't register with me. And I think that's part of what people who say they can't do music, right? And it's a distraction. If you don't anticipate, if your brain doesn't anticipate what's coming up, you know, it might be more of a distraction for me. But I have those tracks where they're very familiar and comfortable. And I think that more than anything, it's like, time to write. Like it puts that in my brain. Um, when it comes to writing itself, one thing that I find that I do strangely, and for some people it helps. Um, Whenever I'm writing a novel, I always make sure my chapters are separate are separate documents. So I don't put that all into one big document. And for me, it's a reward thing. That's like the treat, the little chocolate at the end is like, okay, I'm putting that one away now and I'm opening a new one. Because with short stories, with anything short, you get that sort of success of finishing. And I think with so many of my students, with so many people, when they start novels, that first third of it is like they're plowing through it. It's great, it's going, and then they get to stuck, and then they get, and it's really hard for them to get to that finish line. And for me, the way to do that is, well, I don't write necessarily in order. I don't know if it's um, if I know there's a scene I want to write, I don't force myself to write everything up to it necessarily. I want to get it out and then I can come back to it. So breaking up the chapters helps that way, but also it just gives you that success. Like, okay, chapter one, gone. Eventually, we got to put it all together. But I think for me, that's a real marker of success. And again, I think writers rewarding, you can see a theme here of like rewarding yourself for jobs well done, or seeing, finished products, so to speak, even if it's just steps of a process. It's all those small steps that are going to get you to the big thing. Because if you look at it and you go, like I am now, like, oh, I'm gonna have to narrate this whole audiobook. It's too much. It's too daunting, right? So you have to just break it up into those chunks, I think, for me to get to that full.
It's the old adage, right? How do you eat an elephant in small bites?
Right.
All right, Luella, it's time.
All right, goody goody. So special sauce, Joe. This is supposed to be something that makes you unique that maybe not all of our not all of our writers have in common with you. So what do you got for us?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. It's a difficult one for me is because when I had my kids, so many of my hobbies became theirs, and now I spend so much of my time that's not writing. And to some degree, as a writer, I think I know a little bit about a lot of things, as opposed to knowing a lot about a little. Um, but for me, like the one thing I come back to is like ever since I was young, I was a water skier. And it's a family thing for me. My dad was really into water skiing. I was up on a slalom ski. So people ask me, like, do you do two or one? And I'm like, well, I did one when I was 8, I think, or 9 years old is when I first got up on one ski. And so I've been doing that for basically my whole life. It was one of those things where I think like I could have been really good at this. Probably couldn't have lived in Wisconsin, would have had to like move to Florida where you could actually ski year round. But it's just one of those things that like my dad, who's in his mid 60s, still does, and so it's something we do together. Um, this past summer, I realized that I'm not 20 anymore, and I should maybe slow it down because I tore my pec muscle skiing, and it was like, oh boy, I'm on 30 miles per hour behind a boat, and I'm moving very fast here, and my body doesn't like that contact with the water anymore. And so it's something that I think as I age here, and I'm 42, I'm going to have to sort of see it more as recreation and not as like I'm going to challenge myself to be the best. Um, but it is something that I really still enjoy.
That's
Great,
really
that's a good
cool.
one. I did a lot of water skiing when I was a kid, and I really loved it too.
Yeah.
I was never particularly good at it, but I really enjoyed it.
There's something really peaceful about it. Like it's
Yeah,
same as like hiking, same as sort of like, you're out in nature. Usually we go right away in the morning, so the sun's sort of coming across the lake. There's only fishermen's boats and they kind of hate us because we're skiing in their fishing time. But right, there's something just really peaceful about it.
I agree.
All right. So how about you tell our listeners where can they find you out there in the virtual world?
Yeah, so my website is just josephrein.com, so that's easy to find, and that'll access most stuff. I'm on Facebook, Blue Sky X, Instagram. I'm not a great social media person, and again, that's a bit of a function of I think my age, and I didn't grow up with it. But I do try to get on there as much as possible, especially for book promotion. When it comes to buying books, I really like the website Books to Read because it links you to sort of um, every retailer that you could buy from. And so that's if you're a big chain person or if you like that take you to those your local retailers and those sorts of things. Um, I really like that because then you can buy independent from bookshops if you would like, even order online from independent bookstores. And so that's always my first suggestion for where to go to find my books.
And we'll drop those links in the show notes.
Right.
All right, Luella, let's drop some good news.
Please email us your good news at podcast at wiwrite.org. We would love to share your good news with us. Ken, you want to drop the first bit? What do you got for good news?
Like I say, I'm kind of struggling here, just to try and think of something distinct for good news. As we've talked about before, Luella, we do this every other week, and we want to find good news that tops the previous good news. At least I do. I get self-competitive. But one thing I will say is this is absolutely my favorite time of year to be out and about. I mean, for me, especially golfing. Fall golfing is the best. It's just the weather is nice. The courses aren't as crowded. Sometimes you lose your ball amongst the leaves, but there's just something special about the air and being outside on a golf course when it's this time of year. And we just wrapped up a cousin golf outing on Saturday, where my wife's cousins, we all get together and go have this big outing. And I really, really enjoy it. But it also means that in another month, I'm going to be sad because I'll be forced to swing inside in the simulator. Joe, you kind of alluded to it earlier for some good news. So now it's time. Let it rip.
Yeah, so when I was thinking of this, the first thing that came to mind was I just got out of my sling for my shoulder, which was great news. Long road of injury. But at that very same day, I also received by email a contract for a movie script. So yeah, so it's titled Black Bouquet. It's a thriller, which is on brand. So me and my friend Nino, who I told you about, he sort of co-wrote this. He's going to be directing it. It's never a guarantee in the movie business, which is the biggest thing that I found out, is that even with a contract, until the day they start filming, you don't know if it's going to happen or not. And so the hope is that it'll be filming in the next few weeks, or before fall ends. And so I'm keeping my fingers crossed there. And if it does go through, there is a scene in it with, it's like a flashback scene with large families and kids running around and stuff. And so we're going to fly out. Hopefully it's going to be filmed in Connecticut. We're going to fly out, and hopefully me and my family are going to be extras in that scene. Just a very small, like 2-minute scene in the film. And so take
Oh,
my kids on
fun.
the
That's a
movie
really
set.
great news, man.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm always holding like I'm always crossing my fingers because, like I said, you never know if it's going to happen until it really does. But
Sure.
I think it would be a great experience for them too. So
Yeah, that would
Yeah,
be
totally.
very, very cool.
Yeah.
All right,
All
Luella,
right.
what
So
about you?
well, I want to share a little bit of WWA good news too. So we have our events committee for programming, all the programming that we do other than the annual conference. We're kind of actively developing for 2026 right now and looking out what we might want to get on the calendar. At the moment, we're looking at least one session with Rebecca Zorno. We're looking at she's a really good outliner, and so we want to have her do a session on how to outline for books. Some people are plotters and some people are pantsers, and I feel like doing a little deep dive might be kind of fun. And so stay tuned for more. If you've got a workshop proposal yourself that you think would be good for our members, send it our way, hello@wiwrite.org. And so that's our WWA good news. And I'm going to share also some personal good news, which is that we had another housewarming party event yesterday. We've had all of these little friends coming over for various events with our new house, and having kind of just getting it all settled and getting those new memories made. And we had a nice housewarming / Packer party watching, Packer game watching party. Sorry, Ken, I didn't watch the game, just so we're clear.
That's fair. I
And it was
actually
really
watched it. I
nice
watched it
to
all the
have
way
her.
through, struggling to
Did you
stay
watch
awake
it?
to see it all the way through. Because yes, I mean, it was actually a pretty good game.
Yeah, it is. And I think both the Vikings and the Packers ended up, it was a very close game. Our game was really close too, which I thought was interesting because it
mhm.
felt like we were getting our butts kicked a little bit, and then it ended up being a 3-point game, and it's like, well, that looks a lot more respectable than it felt.
Yes. Yep.
Anyway, we
Absolutely.
digress into football. This is a book podcast.
And I want to thank Joel for coming today onto the podcast. All right. If you've enjoyed this episode, please give us a 5-star rating in your podcast app of choice. This is the type of action that helps other writers find us, helps us grow this program. Thanks for hanging out with us in the Midwest Writers Room. I'm Ken Humphrey.
And I'm Luella Schmidt. Words ignite imaginations and spark change. Never underestimate the power of storytelling.
Midwest Writers Room is a production of the Wisconsin Writers Association. Writing and editing by Luella Schmidt and Ken Humphrey. Sound design and editing by Ken Humphrey. Music for the Midwest Writers Room was written by Michael Ramir C. For more information, please visit wiwrite.org/podcast. Thank you.